Gentlemen, as it says, tell me why. I'm genuinely curious. I have a few friends who are struggling in relationships that, to my eye and to my particular mind, are not healthy. They are with ladies who are rather domineering, who don't let them be themselves, who don't allow them to socialize or associate with their friends, who are extremely jealous and incredibly insecure, and demonstrate this in ways that, to me, are unacceptable. You know, yelling, screaming, getting in your face, arguing with you, making you feel like crap. So what I want to know, gentlemen, is why would you, being of sound mind and healthy spirit and being a genuinely decent human being, why would you enter into and maintain these kinds of relationships? I'm genuinely curious. If you've been there before or if you're currently there, well, not if you're currently there, because that'll get you in trouble with your partner answering this question. But if you've been there before, why was that a thing that you were willing to deal with? Why were these behaviors at that time acceptable to you?
Hi, Chelsea. This is maybe a roundabout way to answer your question, and maybe it's not the answer for everybody, but I remember a number of years ago when I directed a telephone crisis line. And we had lots of men and women call, mostly women though, but men too, who had been left by their boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, whatever, after an abusive relationship. And what really came to mind, or to the forefront, as I conversed with these people, because I would say, well, what would you like to have happen now? And they would invariably say, I want him back. And I had to ask myself the same question you asked. Why? Why would you? Now, I don't know if it's the case with people now, because this was some years ago, but the answer turned out to be because they were lonely, because they were used to the good that was in that relationship, and they wondered if they could have it with anybody else. And they didn't have anybody else around at that point that they could have any kind of romantic or whatever relationship with. And they were really very lonely and wanted, well, they were willing to put up with, I guess. So they said, until the next time, of course, when they called back again. But the answer was mostly always, I want them back, which is interesting. And I don't know whether now it's the same reason, but I think because of loneliness, because people sometimes see the good in the relationship, and that explains the bad until it happens again, and then they have to rethink that. But it is an interesting quandary which you bring up.
You know, Chelsea, personally, I wouldn't want to do that. Personally, I wouldn't want to do that. I've already been in that kind of relationship once. That's once, you know. And that was my first relationship ever. So, I would not want to be in that type of situation again. I just wouldn't. So it's just, the reason I did that thing before was because, well, it was my first relationship. I just took chances. I just took risks. So, although at that time my mind was quite, just quite unstable. I won't go into details, but now, I would not want to enter that situation again. If I had the choice to do it all over, I would not do it. I would not do it. I would not.
My experience relies only through observation. I know you directed the question at people who have either been through it or are currently in, but I'll chime in just with my opinion. So I think it all comes down to really two things from what I've seen. I think it's between insecurity and sex, or a mix of both, who knows. Insecurity, we're coming down to guys who are with these domineering, insulting, rude, belligerent women who more or less control their lives, and they're still in the relationship and they're still trying to maintain it and satisfy the woman and please her, trying to appease her. And I think the biggest reason is mostly through insecurity. These guys internalize the idea that they aren't going to do any better. They get down on themselves. They get really hard on themselves and beat themselves up over these kinds of things, thinking that they're not going to find a decent and, an appealing woman. And so I think that these guys think in their own minds that, through their self-esteem anyways, that they're not good enough for anything better. So they might as well take what they can get. And if they're getting some kind of attention from a woman, whether it's just in terms of a relationship, even if it's, grade F quality, they're still getting that attention, right? So I think it really comes down to insecurity and desperation.
Thank you guys, seriously. Luke and Neil, I think you guys may be onto something. And I've seen women who struggle with this as well. And I know of one individual in particular who has a deep-seated fear of being alone. Like, it just terrifies her. And she will, as a result of that, accept absolutely anything. Absolutely anything. Any kind of wretched, obnoxious behavior. To the detriment of her own health. Mentally, emotionally, and sometimes physically. It's really, really sad. And it's also disturbing. I find that I can speak to her in particular. I've never tried to really talk to any of these guys that I know. I know two of them. It's not a territory I'm well acquainted with as far as how men deal with things. I feel like they think differently than I do. And I wouldn't really know how to approach them in a non-offensive manner. But as far as the ladies are concerned, I've talked to this one in particular, and it disturbs me to know that I can do nothing for her. Literally, I can want all I want to, and there is nothing I can do. I think you definitely may be onto something, both of you. And to me, it's really, really sad. And I don't mean that in a sort of sarcastic, mocking way. I mean, genuinely, it makes me sad. It's disappointing. Because these two individuals that I know in particular, they're better than that. They are better than their current relationships. But they don't see it. But anyway, that's just my thoughts.
I think both sides definitely have endured this, and there are significant differences as to why. Obviously, I think the common ground says that, hey, we're insecure, we don't think that we can find anything better. I'm not that attractive myself, and not that I'm saying that, but, these people who find themselves in these relationships, like I said, probably internalize this mentality of, I don't think that I'm going to do any better because I don't deserve better because I'm not that attractive, I'm not appealing, I have nothing to offer people. So as a result, they find themselves in these relationships which are more or less abusive, and I think that that's really the driving factor behind all of it. I think at that point everything else is just a small nuance. And so you're talking about your friend who is terrified of being alone. I remember when I went through my first major breakup, and I hated being alone. I hated it. And that was what crushed me. And so, I completely understand that, but that was in spite of a breakup. I couldn't imagine going through that just alone as part of my personality, being terrified of being alone. I don't think I could ever do that. And, that has to be a really bad thing for her to go through that, because guys will take advantage of that, and it's unfortunate, but it happens. I also think too with women, especially, financial reasons are a big part of it too. For the most part, men make more than women, and so society has kind of embraced the idea for the longest time that the man is supposed to take care of the woman. And so therefore he kind of has this ability and this unspoken privilege, which I think is stupid, that he can just treat her the way he wants to because he's the man in the relationship and he's paying for her to live and survive. So obviously she has to reciprocate in some way, and it's obedience. It's being able to handle and cope with the fact that, he's going to treat her like shit. And that's just not a good relationship to be in. But unfortunately, she has no other choice unless she wants to be put on the street, because I know how guys can be. They're not going to be civil about it. If she doesn't, listen to him and doesn't do what he says, and God forbid doesn't give him sex, then I don't think that it would be beneath these guys, to at least some of them, to just toss him out in the street and say, good luck, see ya, and then find some other girl that'll just, fit in her place. So it's really unfortunate that both sides have endured this, and that people have to feel like crap because they don't feel like they deserve better.
Quite an interesting question, I have to say, and I have devoted much time to the study of this topic because my experience with it came when I was too young to understand what was going on in my own mind, as it were. I mean, I was about 14 years of age, so pretty much too early for any serious comprehension of what was happening. But I believe that the problem is that a gentleman is very much capable of judging of a woman, or a lady, or to use the same courtly terms. A gentleman is very much capable of judging of a lady so long as he has not, as it were, declared her his all, or the mistress of his heart, if you like. But the moment that this happens, then he ceases to judge entirely. Now, when men declare themselves in love, it's very, very rare that they do that when they actually are, when they have actually given the reins, if you like, to the particular woman to whom they declare their love. But once they actually do, then they cease to judge her completely. They simply have a model in their mind of what this woman is, and then try to fit her every action to that model, rather than evaluate her as the case accords with every situation. Now, once you restore to them their reason, as it were, once you make them stop idolizing this woman, then they will be perfectly capable of judging and repudiating, if not even rejecting, the woman who does not behave in accordance with the rules of decency, or that does not necessarily conform to their expectations. But I don't think that anything short of, to speak again in very dramatic terms, betrayal is capable of restoring a man, as it were, to his reason. So I would definitely advise taking very, 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 very good care whom one loves before one loves them, or her in this case at least.
Hi, Chelsea. All I have to do is think about the people I have heard about and have talked to in counseling and whatever, who have been tremendously physically abused, and they come back for more. And I think one of the reasons they come back from, well, there are a lot of reasons, but one of them is that when the spouse or friend or whatever who's doing the abusing realizes what they've done, they come back and apologize profusely. And that is a moment of joy in the abused person's life. He's back, she's back, and they love me, and they're showing they love me in ways that often we don't do if we're just going through a stable relationship. And I'm not saying we don't love each other and we don't show it, but when you have done something that awful, excuse me, sometimes you make it so perfect for a while for the person who you've abused that they really joy in that perfection. And I wonder if that's part of it. And you're right. It is, whether because of that or because of other things, it is not possible to help them. People have to want to be helped before you can help them. And sometimes if they get to the bottom, they do want to be helped. Sometimes, however, their death or physical injury comes before they get to the bottom, and that's the really sad part. And you're right, Chelsea, I don't know how you I can't think like that. I can't put myself in that position because I would never be in an abusive relationship. But if I were, excuse me, too much chocolate, would I be the kind of person? Here's another thing. Would I be the kind of person who would tolerate that to begin with? Would I have such a poor self-concept of myself that I would allow myself to become involved in something like that? I cannot imagine, and I could be wrong, sorry, but I cannot imagine a person with a really great self-concept even getting to be involved in a relationship like that. So has it something to do with what the person who is the abused person thinks of themselves and how unimportant they think they are? And they will never find anybody who loves them like the joy of this person does when they have apologized. Just some random thoughts, and I don't know how many of them are true, but it is sad when you really can't help people like that.
So I have luckily never been in a relationship like that, but what occurred to me as soon as I heard your question was that this is not a problem unique to men. It's something that I think everyone, no matter their gender, deals with. And, I've seen this the opposite way so many times where there's a woman in the same sort of situation, and I'm just sitting there wondering, what is she doing? She is so much better than that. Why is she with this person? And so I guess that's my contribution to this thread. Is it's really not a question for men or for women. It's for anybody. Why would anybody let themselves be in such a relationship?
Hey there. Well, first of all, let me tell you that that doesn't apply only to girls. There are also some men that do just like that, or act just like that. And my answer is to both situations. People sometimes settle for less. Either they think they cannot find someone else, someone worthy of them, or because they are insecure. There can be many reasons for someone to be in a relationship like that I consider to be abusive. Either it's a woman or a guy. I guess when you are with someone, there should be a lot of commitment. There should be compromising, and people should respect the other. And especially the people they are friends with and they known before the relationship. Of course, it's a bit different if there's an ex-boyfriend or an ex-girlfriend, ex-husband or ex-wife. I admit that there is jealousy. I admit that people may not feel comfortable. But I guess the main reason is people just settle for less. I don't want to get into details, but anyway, whatever. I've seen that before. People have the chance to have all they wanted, all they say they wished for, and they just throw that away. They just ignore that person because of someone else, either because of someone with whom they were in the past and they think, oh well, it didn't work, let's try again, let's see, maybe now it works. Come on, if it didn't work one time, it's not gonna work. If you were in a relationship with someone, and I'm talking about a long-term relationship, if you were in a relationship with someone for 2, 3, 5 years, whatever, I don't know if that's gonna work after some time. it might, but I don't know. But I guess sometimes people do that. They just end up with someone because it's comfortable. Because they know the person. And I had someone telling me that. You know, I know that person, you know, it's a kind of, well, even if I don't love them, yeah, I know them, just, so, yeah, okay, I'm setting for, well, just run over him, bus driver. Sorry. Lost my train of thought. But yeah, I guess that's why some people either they just settle for less and they just want to have someone and it doesn't matter, just they don't want to be alone, or they just, you know, are insecure. They just that's weird. They just don't want to, especially when they know what's good. But anyway, but yeah, that's not. Excuse me. I guess that doesn't apply only to guys. It applies also to girls, you know, because there are many men that do just like that, you know.
Chelsea, this is Veronica. I know that this question was targeted to males, but I kind of just wanted to throw my 2 cents in because I happen to have a lot of male friends in these similar situations that you talk about. One of the things I wanted to say is, in all honesty, I think it's the same reason women put up with it. I think that men experience loneliness and desperation, just as women do sometimes when they've been single for too long or they're afraid of being single. I think sometimes in the blind community, a lot of our families put a lot of pressure on us to get married and have children and, you know, be normal, I guess. And so I think blind men have to deal with this also. And I think that they might feel inadequate if they don't have a partner. They may feel even worse. And so to prevent that from happening, they kind of take what's out there and stick with it. You know, just as I said, women do as well. So I don't think it's any more different than when women choose this same thing. Unfortunately, it's just the way things go, and I think people with disabilities, in all honesty, tolerate a lot more than people without because of the fear of not only being single, but feeling like because they have a disability, that's why they are single. So those are just my 2 cents.
I think you guys are making a lot of excellent points. This discussion is really, really fascinating to me. The reason why is I was in a relationship that I had to kind of deem unsafe. I'd known this guy for about 10 years. I'd gone to high school with him and middle school, and we went back a ways. And so anyway, after we've graduated and we've known each other for about 10 years or so, he says to me, "Do you want to go out?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why didn't I ever think of that, you know?" We've known each other forever. Like, this is, you know, it could be interesting. So I did, and after a couple months, I realized that he was really possessive and extremely jealous. And things just sort of progressed from there. And at one point, he was angry about something. And he grabbed me by the face, like with his hand over my mouth. But he grabbed me in such a way that he had absolute control. And he sort of pushed my head back, and he was saying something. I don't remember what he was saying, because I got distracted. Because I realized that this guy was in a perfect position to snap my neck. He was bigger than me and stronger than me, and he already had a hold of me, and there was nothing I could do about it. And so I had to ask myself, do I actually trust him not to? Of course, the answer was no, so I ended up leaving. And I didn't realize at that time how lucky I was to be able to make that assessment and to be able to decide that I needed to go and have the confidence to carry that out. Now, I wasn't alone in that process. I had the support of family and friends, people helping me out. I kind of told them what happened, and I was like, am I just being a drama queen, or is this real? Is this a legitimate threat? And because I had to make sure, even though that seems crazy now. I was questioning everything. So, anyway, I leave this guy, and then after, I meet these two gentlemen that I've been talking to you about today. And it blew my mind to realize that guys can go through the same exact things that women go through. And the thing I got curious about is the mental connections, that happen for a man when he is dealing with an abusive relationship or an unhealthy relationship, are they the same as what happens for a woman? And it's so interesting to me because I had this very stereotypical view of guys where, they're like, they all have their stuff together and they would never put up with that. And they have lots of confidence and they know who they are and they have self-worth. And, all this stereotypical stuff. Kind of assuming that they're always strong characters and they always know who they are and they never have to question that. And I realize how messed up that is now, but at the time I didn't. And I've been thinking about it a lot, so I had to ask. It's very interesting.
Hey Chelsea, how you doing? This is a really interesting question. Okay, I can't say that I've ever been in this situation because I am not that type of person. I'm not really into allowing myself to be treated in that way, and I don't find people who, as I say, women who think it's okay to act that way, I don't find that attractive. But it is something I have pondered myself on quite a few occasions in my life when I've seen people that I know, and just people in general, guys, allowing themselves to be treated like that. Now you could turn it round on its head and say, well, certain women allow men to do exactly the same thing to them, but it's sort of done in a slightly different way. We've all heard of the expression "pussy whipped." Excuse the terminology. I know it's not NSFK, but it's terminology. I think that can be the case sometimes, but I also think that there are a lot of quite insecure, desperate people out there, desperate men, should I say, who are willing to settle for that type of behavior. I don't know how anybody can do it, to be honest. If I'm in a relationship with somebody, it has to be, based on mutual respect and give and take. I find it really baffling that anybody would allow themselves to be treated like that. It really annoys me. I've had this conversation with people in my circle before who I've seen being treated this way, and I've had to ask them, why are you allowing this to happen to you? Like, what is the deal? They usually don't have much of an answer for you. It's like they don't see it, or they don't want to see it, or they are of the opinion, oh, that's just how this person is. Well, sorry, if that's how you are, you ain't going to be with me. You ain't going to treat me like that. I think, a lot of it comes down to lack of confidence, fear of loneliness maybe, an over-eagerness to please perhaps comes into it as well, but that could be as a result of being desperate. I don't really know. But I'm glad you asked the question. it's good to see a woman asking this question. I don't know. There also seems to be a perception with some women that it makes them look like a strong woman if they can sort of, beat their man down or whatever. Honestly, it just makes you look like a bitch. That's not cool. So, don't know. Very interesting question. Glad you asked it. Sorry I haven't been able to answer it for you in any real way, shape or form, but I just wanted to pass comment on what you were saying. So, yeah, there we go.
There's a lot of ways I could go with this because it's a great question, and I have not listened to listened to the answers yet. So, I think, and this might sound a little crazy, I think it depends on if the man is in a 2-parent home. To be quite honest with you, because I've seen this in action, and this is the only reason I say this. This is because of my experience. Having been raised by a female who is that type of female that you're describing, I definitely can understand why some guys would put up with that, because that may be all that they have a representation of, so that might be what they're comfortable in. My mom was like no nonsense and kind of ran everything, which is why she is still single. My mom had zero tolerance for bullshit. It kind of was her way or the highway. My mom was a trip. That's all I'm going to say. But I think if you have a man in the house who actually can teach a man, because I don't care what women say. I hear them say, I'm your daddy too. Well, no, you're not. Because as much as you can teach them, you cannot teach them how to be a man. And I think part of that is at least in the African American community, I will say, in my community, I think a part of that is being raised in a single parent home. When I became an adult, I was frankly, it worked the opposite. I was turned off by that. So that is the last kind of woman I was looking for when I became an adult and got married. I like a woman that would have their own mind, have their own opinion. It would be okay with the man actually being able to be a man and handling things. And I think, societal changes have a lot to do with as well how this plays out, because you have women that are in high powered positions, or women that have all these have the rights that they did not necessarily have back in the day. So I don't think men are as needed. So basically it's one of those, hey, I don't have to put up with this, that, and the third, and so I'm not gonna deal with you. So that's my 2 cents, and that might not make sense to everybody, but that's kind of how I would the dynamic I would actually look at that as.
Yep, men are just as fallible as women, and I'm glad you discovered that about that guy and got the hell out of there.
No man who is healthy in spirit and sound of mind would accept a relationship like that. Neither would any woman if it was the reverse. So there would have to be extenuating circumstances for someone to accept a situation in which they are degraded by their partner in public and in private. And for that, you'd have to deal with each individual. I mean, some might do it because they fear if they lose that partner, they'll sink into loneliness again, and therefore they don't want to do that. Others, maybe for financial reasons. I mean, some people may not be able to make it on their own without the financial help of their partners. So they put up with a bunch of nonsense. But that's why people like myself are alone, because I wouldn't put up with it. Believe me, not under any circumstances. And I wouldn't do anything like that. I wouldn't try to dominate my partner, and I certainly wouldn't have her trying to dominate me under any circumstances. So, there.
Hi, Chelsea. I've not heard any responses to this thread, so if I repeat what's already been said, my apologies. But I think the answer is pretty simplistic. And I think that men who are in relationships with domineering women, who constrain the male from being himself and allowing him to express himself in the ways that he feels maybe he wants to, or simply because he is so fearful of maybe being alone that he'll sacrifice aspects of who he is for the sake of wanting that companionship. And I've been in this situation personally, so I can attest to that, at least being a reason why I have been in relationships in the past where they were constraining. But as I've learned, right, we can't sacrifice aspects of who we are for the sake of wanting that companionship, because I would rather be alone and be happy than to be with someone and be miserable.
There you go.
Here, here. I am in complete agreement with Orange Circle on this one. I've been in a relationship like this, a couple, where they want to conform you to what they want you to be, and that's not fair for you and your lifestyle. And I made a decision to walk away from that and be without them, and I'm happier for it.
Hey Chelsea, this is such an interesting topic, and I think we've all seen it. You know, why is he with her, or why is she with him? You know, this just doesn't make any sense at all. And I really think that a lot of people have kind of put their finger on it. One, people don't want to be lonely, and some people have a real fear of loneliness, and they're not comfortable being by themselves. Excuse me. So they just feel like they have to have somebody to sort of complete them or something. And of course, the truth is, it doesn't really work that way. The other thing, though, which I think is really kind of interesting, is if you think you are substandard, if you think you're damaged goods, and if you don't have if you don't respect yourself, it's only natural that you're going to hook up with someone who doesn't respect you very much either. You're going to find a way to blow up the relationship if you're with someone who really respects you and you don't have any self-respect, because that person has no judgment. I know I'm nothing, and they think I'm something. And what the hell do they know? I'm going to confirm my own beliefs about myself and be with somebody who treats me like I deserve to be treated. If I'm, if I have a really poor self-esteem and I think I'm dirt, I'm going to hook up with somebody who thinks I'm dirt. I just think that's the way it is. There's not another person that can make you better or make you complete or any of that kind of stuff. I just don't believe it. And I do think that people don't like to be lonely. It's sort of a couple's world out there, and we're sort of hardwired, I think, to be together in a lot of different ways. I thought Derek's answer was really interesting about single-parent families, and I don't want to hijack the topic, but I do think there really is something to that. I think that the way you were raised and the way it was role modeled for you, the way relationships were role modeled for you, really does make a difference. I was talking to my son the other day. He's 20 years old. He's in college. He's a junior. And we were talking about a friend of his who went to high school, and she has become extremely promiscuous. And I said, well, what's going on there? What happened to her? And he said, daddy issues. And I said, what does that mean? Well, this is a woman who was raised primarily by her mom, and she had an off and on relationship with her father and stuff. And he said, Dad, girls with daddy issues, he said, they're always promiscuous, always looking for some guy to make it right for them. Now, we're really stereotyping here. And every situation is different and all of that. But I do think there's really something to be said for that. There are, like Derek talked about, a strong mom and no dad, and then there are situations, and that's for a son, and then maybe it's a little different situation for a daughter. Look, I think single parents can and often do a wonderful job of raising kids. And if you are a single mom and you have some male influences in that kid's life, I think you can really compensate. Or if you're a single dad and you have some female influences in that kid's life, I think you can really compensate. But I do think there's kind of a reason why God made parents, why there's a man and a woman. That's not to say that two females or two males can't do a terrific job of raising a kid. But I'm just saying that I think moms and dads bring different juice to the table. And yeah, I think there's something to what Derek said. But primarily I think there's a lot of people who don't want to be lonely. And there's a lot of people who think, I'm really not any good, and anybody who thinks I'm good is just wrong, so I'll find a reason to sabotage that relationship. I'm going to be with somebody who agrees with me that I'm really not much to get excited about. And that's why you see so much drama in relationships and, and that kind of thing. So for whatever it's worth, those are my thoughts.
Guys put up with that nonsense primarily because of sex and, as one of the other people said, insecurity. Sex because, well, they're getting regular sex from this person and they don't feel like there are other options available to them at the time. And, that's where insecurity ties in. They don't believe that they were to be able to get anybody else at the time. But once they do believe there are other options available, or once they get sick of the nonsense, then they ditch the chick.
Hi, Chelsea. I don't think this is a gender-specific thing because I think there are plenty of women in unhealthy relationships where men are controlling and socially isolating and what have you. Honestly, I hate to say it, but I think the reality of it is very few people are capable of having really healthy relationships. And that is because relationships take compromise, which most people simply aren't able or willing to do. They take listening, which, again, communication. A lot of people can't communicate openly and honestly. And sometimes they take hard work. And relationships can be incredibly rewarding. But the most rewarding relationship does take some degree of work and sacrifice. And work and sacrifice are virtues that are not very prevalent in today's society.
The other thing you need to factor in is the level of the relationship. So, for example, if two people are just dating, it would be primarily sex and insecurity, like we said before. But if they're married with kids, then that's a different story. Because women, I know from not personal experience with regards to me, but personal experience with regards to my friends, they do use children as a weapon. I.e., if you leave me, you're not going to be able to see your kid. Or, if you leave me, I'm taking half your shit. So, there are financial considerations, and there's the ability to see your children as a consideration as well. And that's why some guys do put up with that bullshit.
So I will listen to the answers here in a bit, but I think I can give a fair estimation. Boys, when they're becoming men, are never taught what to expect in a relationship. They're taught to be expected from in a relationship. A girl has 50 things she wishes a guy knew. A girl has, oh, you get you a man that does this. Oh, you get you a man that's going to take care of you. Oh, you get you a man. If a man was to hint about having expectations in a relationship, there would be a lot of static. Now, I agree with you, and actually I feel sorry for you. Here you are, you're a woman, you have friendships or brothers or somebody else who are in bad relationships. What's interesting about that is that while you will try to help them, they may take your words and they may be able to excuse it in their mind. I guess my wife refers to this term, give themselves permission, by saying, well, she says it's not okay, so maybe I should get out. I was in a very difficult place, even in my own marriage at one time. And there was a lot of yelling. There was a lot of things towards me, but I also knew that there was a lot of things upset and problems with my spouse. This is going on over 12 years ago. The advice I got from men, even conservative men, okay, these are not liberal, these are not carrying a purse, these are not, the advice I got from men was, well, you probably just need to listen to her more. Now, I was doing everything I could. Now, I have no blame for her in that situation because I understand, and I understood then that there was a lot going on that I just didn't know about. And that what I did know about, I felt like there was a lot that wasn't in her control. There was a lot of things that, like, I wasn't being directed at because you're not doing this enough. But the only thing, no person ever said to me, Leo, I'm sorry, that's really rough. Men don't hear this from women or men, typically. One of the best educations you'll ever get about the state of what it is to be a man, and it's part of how I started to wake up, is meet some men, and I know some people are going to not like me saying this, who were once women and are now men. The media will tell you that, oh, now they're privileged and they're walking around and they're blah, blah, blah. I tend to be pretty empathetic in my relationships. I tend to be somebody who does ask a friend of mine if they're all right. Can I help you with that? It's not a thing of trying to, I don't have big words about it. Like, people will say, well, that was really good that you blah, 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 and did a blah, 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 blah. I just do it. It's organic within me. I don't even know a quarter of my wife's words for those things. I just am like that. And I have met a few men who were once women, and the first thing they've told me is, you're the first man I've ever seen do that to either me or somebody else, because it is rare among men. You can get teased for it. You can be joked about for it. And they'll tell you about yourself, they'll tell you to your face, nobody asks anymore. Nobody asks how I'm doing, nobody asks those kind of things. Now, this is not a poor me, but you are asking a very pragmatic question. I quite literally didn't know that I could stand up to certain things. Now, that doesn't mean that I was worthless or just a doormat or something, or a dish rag, because I was working hard, I was coming home late from the office, I was doing second shift, taking care of my daughter and all the other stuff. So I wasn't like I was being some kind of useless, poop. But there were things that I didn't know that as a man I could stand up to. It hadn't even occurred to me, and then the thought when it did was like, oh, I can't do that. I mean, there's a YouTube video, and you might question why the man allowed it. Or you might question why somebody puts this up on YouTube, but there's a YouTube video of a woman screaming at a man because he won't take her to the lake. He has to get his truck fixed and some tires. There's a problem and there's a few other things. It has to be done before you can even go to the lake, apparently. And he sits there quietly and calmly while she's yelling and screaming and breathing really hard and all this other stuff for 10, 15 minutes. And as men, I think most of us have been through this. Whether you're if you're a boy and an older woman wants to take it out on you, she can. Remember, we're the criminal half the species to many people, right? Just by virtue of being a man, if you're walking across a parking lot, you must be a problem. Nobody ever says there's a woman out there in a scary way. But you've been the blind man walked onto not the original poster, but some of you have been the blind man walked onto somebody's property by mistake, thinking you were turning to somebody else's. And through a window, you might hear, "There's a man out there," right? You scuttle off, and I'm not a big man. I'm 5'7". I'm a shrimp. I used to get called crack baby when I was younger, and a word they use for homosexual men that's not very nice, AIDS babe, all that stuff, AIDS guy, and crazy names by people that were wanting to, be diminutive about my size and non-lack of broad shoulders. So I'm obviously don't look like a physical threat. I'm not a big man. But by virtue of being a man, you are already a threat. So a lot of times, I think what we men do is try to prove, especially when you're younger, I don't try to prove anything anymore. I know that I can't. You try to be good enough. And you know what? Whatever gender or lack thereof, man, don't try to be good enough. You can't. You cannot. People are waiting for you to be good enough. It will never work, no matter what gender you happen to be or not. But we try to prove that we're good enough, and then we also try to prove we're not part of the criminal element. You don't have to be afraid of me. Somebody put a post up about creepy men, right? Will you ever see a post about creepy women? Are women ever called creepy? Not even Jodi Arias from Arizona, who stabbed her boyfriend 29 times while he was in the shower, and then shot him, and then finally slit his throat while he was still alive, was never called creepy. She could do that. Now, she did end up getting a life sentence, but there was a huge Free Jodi movement, and there was a huge, let's let her out. And I mean, if a man did that, none of us would have had any trouble having him put to death. But that's why in a relationship you're going to see that. Because you say, well, that stuff is not okay. I've heard that too. My wife uses that word about somebody sometimes. Well, that wasn't okay that they did that. Part of my mind thinks, I guess they thought it was. I guess they did. And a lot of guys don't know. It's different. But it's interesting that you bring this up, because here's the thing. The older feminists were absolutely correct to point out to men that, well, how would you like it if this happened to your father, your brother, your son, your mother, your daughter, your somebody else, women that are close to the guy. How would you like if it happened to somebody you know, a woman you know, right? That was perfect, and I hope that's one thing I hope they still do if they're still talking about violence against women and all that stuff, which they probably are, but hopefully if they could tell the difference between one and the other of somebody who is and isn't, then hopefully they are still referring to that when if you can rehabilitate somebody who does those kind of violent acts. You will never hear that on the other side. They've literally done studies where a woman is yelling and screaming and hitting and stuff on a guy, set it up as actors. Nobody will intervene, and for the people who aren't intervening, there's an interviewer down the block away as they walk past. Why didn't you intervene? Oh, he probably deserved it. To a person. Basically, the true story is nobody cares. And I've been there several times in my life. Now, this is not me sobbing. I'm just saying to you how it actually works. If you're a man and you're being beat up, and the aggressor is a woman, you can just kiss your ass goodbye. I would. I knowing even all that I know now, thinking, well, okay, maybe we're not pieces of shit. Maybe we can do something. It's not a risk I would take unless I thought I could just get away. I guarantee that nobody else is going to intervene. If it's a guy, it's a fair fight. You can fight him. You can do whatever. But the minute you ever even raise a hand in defense as a boy, as a man, against a woman who is aggressor towards you, now she is the complete and utter victim. I've been there too. I had a friend who was there who, in college, was beat by 3 women. We found him outdoors. He had one arm. He was a drummer with one arm. He had both arms, but his second hand, he was very small. He had a different kind of stick he used in his other hand. We found him. Campus security told him they couldn't press charges because these were women, and women were just getting their needs met. Right? Now, you might go, but that isn't fair. But if you've lived in a family with men and boys, you know that's how it goes. You're supposed to be able to take it. You know that is exactly how. Doesn't mean that you would do it. Plenty of women didn't do it, right? That was one incident where he did get it. And it wasn't so much that they did it, as bad as that was, right? Because is the criminal element in our society really that large? Not really. But you walk by a lot of people that wouldn't. But it's that when it does happen, you are screwed. Society will never. They won't even ask what you're wearing in the case of what women have said in the past some dude would do for a rape thing. They won't even entertain the prospect of it at all. Or if they begin to entertain the prospect of it before they find out your aggressor was a woman, as soon as they find that out, oh, you must have done something. That's why these boys are staying in those places. There's probably if the roles had been reversed in some places where I have been in life before, I guarantee you that if I had been a woman, there would have been a smattering of people that would have said, oh, you should get out of that. Like I told you, when I was 19, I 18 or 19 or whatever, I finally disappeared from a relationship that I was in that was very violent. But it was not unlike the way that some actual older women were towards us boys growing up. But the way I did was that she stopped the car and stuff on the road, and I don't know what she was doing because we didn't have cell phones back then. Maybe she had, I don't remember, she had went into the store. And as a blind man, this is kind of a whatever move, but I did have my cane with me hidden because she was like a lot of young girls of that time. Oh, don't show your cane. That's embarrassing. Oh, you don't want to do that. Oh, I'll be too embarrassed. Hell, I had sisters like that. But I just, boom, popped the old sword out, popped the white stick out, opened the door, and hopped out, and I figured I will probably be able to go where I need to go. I can just get back along the road. I'll stick to the side of the road and go. And thumb a ride or something if I'm too far out, but maybe just walk. And I was still in town, but I wasn't quite sure where. So I did. I took off, and I was on a street, and I found that I was in a part of I forget where it was, Gresham or something like that. So ultimately, I did get help to get orientated to where I was at and get to a Mac station and stuff. And it didn't take her calls, and um, just sort of got out. I mean, it was that she didn't pursue because for whatever reason, I guess. But well, she did call my house for a while, but for a while I just pretended my phone didn't work because this is before caller ID. Oh yeah, my phone doesn't work, dude. Don't call my house. To my friends, just come over, and yeah, I mean, it was early. It wasn't we hadn't been together very long, a few weeks, but something just clicked, and she was yelling and screaming and carrying on, and I just got out. But most times, you don't, and that to me was a very risky move. That's if other people had known, well, you should have talked, well, you should have explained, you should have apologized. I didn't apologize. I hadn't done anything. There was no way anyone like that could accept your apology. I mean, so that's just how it is for us. It's not popular to talk about, and so I do want to thank you, and I'm sorry for the long post. I do want to thank you because it's not popular. And again, don't get panties in a knot. You can have all the posts about creepy men you want to, and how men are terrible on here, and not you personally, but people who might be, and how you saw a word on the internet, and so now you're a victim. I understand all that. We're going to give you the cookies and the milk for that, but I think it's worth saying that when it does happen to one of us, nobody's really going to respond. And for us, we've never been, the only thing we've been educated towards in a relationship is what you're supposed to bring her, what she will expect of you. It's very different from that angle than what you may or may not expect. And I don't know what happened if I was single now, if I would just stay on the fringes or end up in another or not. Since I have started to see the light, if you will, on certain things, I see the world very differently than I did 15 years ago. But it's not a huge transformation because I still have everything that I always was. I might know that this technically might not be the way to look at the world or whatever, or that the way that we are, but you still have all that, I guess people would say, baggage. It's still there. So I'm sorry that your friends are going through that. One could say that you are, because you're their friend, you're kind of getting the shaft too, but your concern for them is very cool. I mean, it's not cool that you're in that position, but it's also extremely rare. It's also extremely not conventional. So don't be surprised if others, both men and women, try to tell you how, oh, those people must be doing something wrong. They must deserve it. It's sort of like the way my grandmother was about if you came home from school and said that somebody got sent to the foster system because the parents burned them with cigarettes. Well, that child must have done something, or they wouldn't have burned him like that. Well, of course, we would never say that about kids now. That's actually kind of sick. But if a dude is in a relationship, that's what we say. If she's yelling, screaming at him, he must deserve it. We never actually say, dude, there's no reason. I mean, like men will say, dude, there is absolutely no reason to strike a woman ever. Don't. Just walk away. Just take a walk, dude. Just hit it. Hit the road. Just do something else. And don't strike. But we never say that the other way. We always say he must have done something. There are people who think there's an evolutionary reason for that because we're the expendable, and we are. You could have a society of 100 women and 10 men, but And it would reproduce itself. It'd be fine. You could never have that with 10 women, 100 men. But you know, not enough of us die like in the savannah days, when yeah, maybe half the women died in childbirth, but at least 3/4 of the men died when it came to other conflicts and accidents and things like that. It was pretty constant. That was actually a difference between us and Neanderthal. Neanderthal, the bones they found, both male and female died in equal numbers of accidents, hunting accidents, and all kinds of things. But they found with Homo sapiens that what looked like hunting accident deaths, accidental deaths, violent deaths, much, much less among women than men. Far less. And it's still true today. I know we talk about violence against women, and nobody promotes that. But men are thousands of times more likely to die in a violent way. But we're also programmed to accept it. We're much more vulnerable on the road, if you will, in many ways. It's just assumed that if you did die, you probably did something wrong, or you probably got yourself into it, or you probably didn't defend yourself well enough, or any number of other things. That's just what's assumed. So anyway, these are things I've found out over the past 15 years that have really answered a lot. And a lot of people say, wow, that must be depressing to know. Well, if you realize it's just systems, you realize it's not you. So it's actually an improvement. If you realize it's just biology, basically. And yeah, you are screwed as a dude. At least you know that it wasn't you that did it. You know, it's not personal. Especially if you find out the whole disposability thing, then you totally know it's not personal. But anyway, hope that explains some of it. Somebody probably mentioned this, and I'm sorry to go on long. On the last one, I will not here. Divorce is expensive if you're a man. Now, I know nowadays they have divorce lawyers for men. When I was a lot younger, when I was a boy, specifically in the 70s and 80s, you heard the phrase cheaper to keep her. Cheaper to keep her. I didn't know what that meant when I was a boy, but you would hear it by miserable men. You'd overhear it if you were a boy. Unless she threw him out. If she decides to get rid of him, which is a lot of times the end result of a really dominant situation, he'll be beaten down enough and used up enough that he's now no longer any good for anything, so she'll throw him out. There's a cash payout at the end of that one in the United States. Now, other countries, I know it's a little bit more of a 50-50, but in the United States, most states, if it's her word or his, it's hers. And courts are set up. I think the LGBT marriage may throw this one on its head. I can't wait. And I know LGBT people, I'm not saying I want you to get divorced. But when that eventually happens, probably be quite a while because you guys had to fight to even get married. But when that eventually happens, the courts are not going to be able to just automatically do in family court what they do, which is there's a woman, give her the things. There's a man, take the things. I've seen it happen when a couple even wanted to be somewhat amicable. I mean, nobody is happy with each other if they're getting divorced, but amicable. The woman was being reasonable, he was being reasonable, trying to, and the lawyers would tell her, this is how it's going to get paid for. We're going to take everything from him. And so he loses the house. And in less equitable situations I've seen, if he is out of the relationship, he doesn't get to see his kids. He gets to pay for them, but doesn't get to see them. She gets the house, the suburban house, the 2 cars, everything else, because the kids are going to be big enough to need a car pretty soon, so she gets both. And he's downtown in a little apartment. And then when it comes to seeing his kids, she says to the court, "I'm really have concerns about where he's living. I don't want my children going there." And people in court will listen to that with a straight face and accept it. That should tell you everything there is to know. I know when my daughter turned 18, now, I'm not saying my wife would ever have walked out on me, but you don't know what's going to happen in life. But when my daughter turned 18, one of the biggest pieces of relief that I had was that I got to be there for the duration of her upbringing. There are an awful lot of men who would like to. I've sat with them while they cried this stuff out. Just as guys, they were just like, oh my God, I can't see my kids. I got to go home, tuck my little girl in at night. For all the problems that were going on in our marriage for a time, some things that happened, and maybe stuff that was going on, and I'm not going to make somebody look bad in any way, because it's A, a long time ago. B, wasn't entirely her fault, and I think there were other factors. But for anything that was going on when we lived in Florida, I thought to myself all the time, well, I at least get to be with my daughter, because there are many men who don't. And I think that many men will stay if the kids are there. In some ways, like the way that women will stay. Women are afraid that the man will hurt the kids. And men are afraid maybe that the woman will hurt the kids in some cases. Never in mine. But, I wasn't really considering leaving. But most of the time, when you hear a man talk about it, he'll say, I'll never get to see my kids again. My kids will be turned against me. My kids will be told what a terrible person I am, and those kind of things. And so they will stay if they have kids involved. I've seen it, if they are allowed to stay. And it's sort of like, what's interesting is that if she wants him gone, she has the right to stay with the house, right? She puts him outdoors. Oh man, I'm outdoors, man. Right? You used to see this. I don't know if so much happens anymore because I'm not around couples per se in the way that maybe used to be. I'm just around just people. But there's a fight. Who gets locked out of the house? He gets locked out. He sleeps in the truck, right? He is pushed outdoors. Who's sent to the couch? He is sent to the couch under those conditions. That's how that works. And nobody questions it. Ever. I've never seen anyone say, hey, she should have left. If she didn't want to stay, she should have left. But that isn't how it works. Now, I don't know what will happen on account of the way LGBT relationships go, and how that's going to change the courts, because you're now no longer going to be able to stick it to one gender over another. How is that any of that going to even work? So I think hopefully we'll see more equalization. I tend to look at equality coming in two forms, upward and downward. You have upward equalization where you take groups of people who are, let's just say, hungry or whatever, like, every city has a hunger group in the community that tries to deal with the hunger in their community. In the United States, 1 in 6 people go without food, and tries to upwardly equalize, make sure they have food, make sure they have supplies. Then there's downward, which I think is terrible. Downward is where, if somebody has it and I don't, I should make sure they don't have it, whether or not I get it in their place. And I think too often a lot of the politicized stuff is downward facing. So that if a man is, just by virtue of being born a baby boy, for example, well, somebody else at some distant time did something. So you now we need to make sure you don't get the opportunity to speak up or the opportunity to defend yourself or anything like that, because somebody else did something to somebody else that you're not related to. That's downward. Upward would be saying, well, look, we just shouldn't do this regardless of gender. We just shouldn't do this to anybody. Let's not be doing this to anybody. You know, let's try to be a little bit more fair-minded towards all of us, and you know, take a question that comes up or a challenge that comes up based on the merits, not based on the gender. Not go, well, okay, it was between he and she, so we're just going to give it to her. It's actually, I don't know if sexist you would call it that, but it's actually demeaning towards you, if you're a woman, if nobody's going to take your word or but say to you, well, we're just going to give it to you because you're the girl, he's the guy, and you ultimately will discover that you could have sat there and gone blubber, 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 and they would have just given it to you. They didn't consider it based on the merit. If you're a responsible adult, you want it to be unbiased in that you want it to be, they're taking it based on the merit of what you're saying, rather than, oh, just give it to us. You know, you don't want that, do you? You want to have people give you the credit for it, whatever side it is, because of what you brought. So, not just, oh, okay, well, chromosome configuration, boop, okay, we'll just give it to her. Okay, boop, it's done. You know, sort of like in some parts of the world where it's the complete opposite, which is equally dipstick. An upward move would be to remove that part of the equation altogether and just do it on the credibility of the thing. If she's being violent towards him or he's being violent toward her, it's all wrong, right? We could have violence in relationships as a thing, but we don't. We say violence against women only. How are you going to work that out when it's two women? Think about that. You could even spin this as they're now being hetero. What is the word my daughter said? Heteronormative. Yeah, there you go. You don't have to like us. You don't have to give it to us because of us. You could do it for the benefit. You could do it for the benefit of yourself and other groups of people. You can make it work.
I've had one relationship that's been like this, and it lasted for about a month and a half. I will not stand for that bullshit. You know, if I'm going to let her be who she is, and, you know, there's the thing about a relationship is there's that level of trust that allows for freedom, you know, and if someone is not trusting and they don't allow you your space or your freedom, then that's not healthy. That's not good. And if you allow it to continue, I just think some dudes they don't really think about it. Maybe they think that they can't find someone better, or maybe they have this really negative view that whatever woman they find is going to be like this, so what's the point of finding another woman? You know, I honestly feel like there's a lot of guys out there who say, you know, women, I just don't understand it, or women this, or women that. It's like, come on, dude. You know, women have all kinds of different personalities, just like men do. And I think guys feel like it's their obligation to settle when no one should be settling, you know? So it's ridiculous, man. It's ridiculous.
Do you know, I think it's amazing, actually, what a man will put up with in terms of domestic abuse, psychological and maybe physical. It's amazing how much torment a man will put up with if the house he comes back to is in good domestic order. By that I mean, if he comes home in the evening after a hard day's work and there's a dinner on the table for him, and his clothes are washed and ironed, and all the little domestic issues of the house are looked after by the woman. She replaces the mother, who well, in our country, in Ireland, we're notorious where the mother spoils men, you know, as opposed to the daughters. The men, the lads of the house are always spoiled, you know, the boys always have to have enough to eat. They always have to be looking their best, you know, because they're mammy's little boy. And this can go on. I've seen it again and again. If the ladies who are domineering and jealous and abusive, they often tend to keep a house very tidy, and they don't mind cooking for their man. They might hit him with the frying pan over the head afterwards, but they'll certainly make sure he's well fed. And of course, the man then can spend most of the day out working. Do you know, he can be gone at 7 in the morning. I see this, friends of mine, they'd spend the whole day gone. They wouldn't come back till 9 o'clock at night. And because they work so long, they tend to make a lot of money. This is another thing I've noticed, is that domineering women who are full of the energy, and they're often very, very handy at spending money. They'll go through it like it's confetti. And they can be very high to maintain. So the lad will make the money, that'll suit her. She can go off during the day shopping and spending the money. But then you have the added complication of children. And to keep children and keep a home relatively happy, keep the relationship going somehow, a lot of lads tend to bite their tongue, go home at night, have their dinner, in the knowledge that the house is looked after, ran well, that the clothes have been washed. He'll hop into bed. I don't know, the sex might be good, it might be an issue, but he'll be up in the morning. They're probably too tired. He's probably too tired to even bother with it. If he's working 6 days a week, like as many lads do. Especially if it's hard physical labour, like on the buildings or in a trade or something like that, you know. So they wouldn't be around the house much anyway. And I think I've seen they will tend to put up with it, just for the sake of a certain amount of happiness. And of course, a lot comes down to love being blind as well as, and of course, you know, people don't fight all the time, and people who get cross and contrary, who have mood swings, can be the happiest people in the world by other times. So it's not all, I would, you know, rough sailing. There would be plain sailing in it too, and maybe there's enough good times to outweigh those times where the jealousy and the hatred and the fighting, you know, when as the periods of making up can cancel out a lot of the badder, harder times as well. So now that's just a little insight from what I have observed over the years. You might think it's daft, but from what I've seen, sometimes the daft things, they're daft relationships anyway, so, you know, these little things can be huge in them.
Well, I think people in general just, you know, whenever they're in a bad relationship and everything, I think they stick with it because they're afraid of being alone, and they are in a comfort zone, and that is why they put up with all that nonsense. And also, too, I think as well, it's for some people, not all, but I think for some people it's, you know, they enjoy being able to say that they have a boyfriend or they have a girlfriend or, you know, something like that. And, you know, believe me, I was, you know, in a relationship for over 3.5 years where me and my ex, we had a lack of communication, and it wasn't until about, you know, over 3.5 years after I had started dating this woman, whenever I finally decided to break it off. But, you know, after I broke up with her and everything, you know, it just, you know, it was a relief for me. And, you know, there are many times I thought about breaking up with her while we were together, but it just, I don't know, I just couldn't. You know, I enjoyed being able to say that, hey, I had a girlfriend and everything, but, you know, in my opinion, you know, it's one thing to say you have a girlfriend for a guy, you know, to say that, but it's a whole different thing to actually have one. And I'm going to throw something else in here too. I know it's probably maybe weird for some of you, but those of you who are believers in Christ like I am will get this, but it's just like saying you're a Christian and then actually being one. Totally different. There's big differences, than just saying something and actually being something. Another thing too is that people, they like to have that big old nice popular name, just to look good and everything, but they don't want to do the work or anything, whether it's with organizations or something like that. Tell you, it's pretty messed up. But I think that at the beginning of this post, here, my response, pretty much answers your question, Chelsea. And I hope you're having a blessed weekend.
Chelsea, this is Lyndon from Austin, Texas. Try to answer your question, although the answer I'm going to give you probably is going to make you have 1,000 more questions. I'm a veteran of these kind of relationships. I have learned from these kind of relationships. I've learned what I don't like. I've learned that I don't like the domineering, controlling, isolating female. But I would also say that this type of question fits into the same category as to why women do the same thing. Why do women allow men to involve them in relationships that are domineering, that are isolating, that are sometimes verbally or physically threatening? I think the answer for myself was the people that were in my life that were like this. I believed falsely that there's good in everyone. And the fact is, there is not good in everyone. That some people have been so damaged by their upbringing, by their circumstances, that they don't know good if it slapped them in the face. And there's no point in trying to explain to them that there's a better way to live. There's a less threatening, a less hostile way. Because in my humble opinion, individuals like this need chaos in their life and around their life to validate their importance. And the chaos they create is to validate their importance. I don't know any better way to explain it other than that. However, after a lot of self-examination, self-improvement, and yes, even counseling and therapy, I found a way to find that person who can and did provide a wonderful relationship. A wonderful relationship based on mutual respect and love. And it worked. And when you find that, and when you identify that, and when you click with that person on that level, you do not ever want to find yourself back in those other kind of entanglements, which that's all they are. They're not relationships, they're just entanglements. And sometimes they begin in some very crazy ways. And usually they become sexual way too quick. And once it becomes sexual, it's pretty difficult to break that entanglement. And that's why it happens. And some men are used to that. Some men have grown up with that in their family. Their mother was a very domineering, controlling, very difficult person to deal with. Their family members were very difficult to deal with. So that's what they're used to. They identify the norm, and to them that's normal. It's not to you and me, most likely. At least I would say not for me any longer. But nonetheless, I've spent more time on this than you probably are comfortable at listening. So I'll leave it alone at that and just tell you that these are the questions that if we could solve, we could then make drastic changes in the way relationships develop, how they work, and we could identify the bad characteristics and deal with them before they get to the point of terminal.
Well, I mean, let's see. Now, I'm coming at this from a happily married situation that we've just a little over a year now, and yeah, I've been married before. It didn't work out, and I stuck in it for a while because I kept hoping things would get better. So to some degree, I married someone with depression, and I genuinely believed that we could, she would overcome this, and we'd have a healthier, ultimate, marriage for a while. So I guess to some degree, I was in denial of the fact that it wasn't going to change. I couldn't, with the resources I had, do enough, and probably no one could have done enough to overcome the depression that she was suffering. So that's part of it. You really, if you go that length to get married, I mean, and you're a person of conscience, you really want that to work, and you're willing to suffer to make it work. So to some extent, it's that. I guess other people too, you're making a lot of assumptions there of sound mind and health. That might not be true. It might appear to be true. We can put on masks for people. A lot of people seem to feel that that's acceptable to just do. Meanwhile, behind that mask, you don't have a very healthy perspective on yourself, and you could be, there's of course the fear that I would presume is the same reason why, I'm frankly baffled often by women who stand for a lot of restrictive idiocy that their men put on them, and I ask the same question: why do you stay? What propels you into staying? And I think really it's the same forces at work. The wish to be needed, to feel like you're not alone. Loneliness is a biggie. I lived a long time alone, and I never want to go back to that if I can help it. I probably will at some point, and I've made my peace to some extent with it, but I genuinely prefer being in a relationship that's a healthy one, and I will go through unhealthy periods hoping that it will become healthy again. So I'm not just going to ditch a relationship because it goes sour briefly. I have to really know that I have tried everything that I could to fix this, to make this better for both of us. And I did that with my first marriage. I stuck it out until I was damn sure that I wasn't going to look back later and go, you know what, I should have tried this, that, the other thing. I think if you commit to a marriage, you owe that to your partner. You owe that to almost the institution of marriage itself. To make darn sure that there's nothing you've missed that could have fixed it. It still feels horrible when it goes wrong, and when you really are forced to conclude that you cannot honor the most sincere, serious commitment you ever make in your life, and you have to turn away from it. That wrecked me for quite a while. But at least I knew that I had tried everything. It wasn't the case that I was second guessing myself a lot. It just takes a while to sort of find yourself again. So that's one thing, I guess, and I would think it's the same kind of forces. Like I had no idea that I'd get a second crack at marriage. I almost had one, and then she left. Just suddenly decided that no, she wanted to, her own space, and she wanted, her reasons. She had just gotten was finishing a degree and wanted to, be totally free to pursue where it led, and yada yada. Right. So our relationship went by out the window. That really hurt. That hurt even worse than the marriage I had that failed, because it looked so promising, and we never got to find out. We didn't try everything. She just decided unilaterally that it should end, and so it did. And yeah, as I say, that was far, far more painful, because I tried everything in the marriage to make darn sure that I hadn't overlooked things. So yeah, that's part of it. And I presume that would be the same for women in abusive situations. They really hope or pray that something will change their man into the man that they want to be with, instead of the monster that they're with currently. That's a lot of it too. Is, will you ever get a second chance? I really did not expect, especially after the lady walked away from me after my first marriage failed. I thought, okay, I've had two sort of cracks, and there's no way I'm going to get another relationship. And I kind of stopped looking after a while. Didn't quite give up hope, but the next thing to it, I just kind of made my peace with being alone and lived my life that way. And then out of the blue, through a series of connections going back to a camp we both attended when I was 16 and she was 12, a mutual friend who knew us both connected the dots, connected us, and we were married. It's been great. It's certainly not something I really expected. So the thing is, before you're ready for another relationship, you have to come back to yourself, and that takes time. And it really feels like, surely you've proven, it doesn't feel very intuitive, but you really do have to find peace with yourself and who you are before you can really be ready for a second serious relationship. So, yeah, all these forces at play, I think, and just generally insecurity, loneliness, the fear of being alone, the fear of not having someone there to talk to, that sort of thing. And it all plays into it. Low self-esteem, right? You might not have a genuinely objective view of yourself or your place in society or chances of finding someone else. A lot of dating sites, you are off everyone's radar. If you don't have a job and you have a disability, things like that will put you off everyone's radar, and you'll really feel that no one will give you the slightest chance, and it's hopeless. So that too can trap people in unhealthy relationships.
Yeah, you do. You notice this, don't you? Sometimes you see it a lot with small guys that are with these overpowering, usually obese women that dominate them and kick them around like a used toy. I've seen that a couple of times. That's funny. I don't get that. What attracts these men, such small, effeminate almost men, to these big, large ladies? But also you see it a lot with lesbians. I've noticed that as well, where there's, well, not so much now, I don't see very much, but years ago in fact I knew these pair of lesbians that were puppy walk. The dominant one was the puppy walker for guide dogs, and she had this girlfriend that was very attractive and very petite and just very got a lovely little thing she was, and yet she was with this woman that was hugely overweight, trainers, wearing baggy jeans, short hair, butch of a character. It was just bizarre. All I could think of was Laurel and Hardy, and that's exactly what it is. It don't make sense, does it? Sometimes with these relationships, very odd.